Dr. Cooper figures out how.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Wolf, read roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Radke. Ms. Albright?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Turn the side on.
Mr. Lane, here.
Mr. Gerson? Here. Mr. Strobel? Here. Mr. B. Scott? Mr. Wolf here. Mr. Radke?
Here.
Ms. Olson?
Here.
Two missing, 7 present.
All righty. You'll see we have a special voting meeting as well as committee of the whole. We'll proceed first with our special voting meeting. There is an agenda edit you'll see on your desk. Are there any other edits by board members for our special voting meeting?
Mr. Radke, I have an agenda edit for the committee of the whole.
Committee of the whole?
Is there also one for the voting meeting?
There is. 8AB was changed to just, I guess 8A was pulled out, is that correct?
Yeah, thank you.
So, all righty. Public participation notes are noted in the inside of your folder. If you have a comment to make to the board, please step forward. You have 30 seconds, state your name and address. So let's, I guess, move right into, I guess Mr. Verdelli is here from RBC Capital to go over some good news for some bonds.
Okay, thank you. It's nice to see all of you. It's been since 2017 since I've been here to help the district with some refinancing opportunities, so there's certainly a few new faces around the table. I work at RBC Capital Markets, and I've been helping the school district with their bond financing since 2008. About 4 or 5 years ago, there was the last time interest rates dropped like they have recently. There were some significant opportunities that we were able to bring to the district, and the district took great advantage of how low rates were. In fact, the 2017 refinancing saved the district $4.1 million. And when we get to the district's existing debt structure, you'll see basically that the district had decided to take the savings from that transaction over a 5-year period. So that has your debt service running at a rate that is about $800,000 lower than what it had been, and it's going to go back up there in 2023. So that's something that in our discussions with the administration, we've talked a little bit about the opportunities that I'm going to talk about here in just a minute in terms of thinking about what those future budgets look like and the refinancing opportunities that we have before us. I was here, I guess it was back in April, met with Dr. Cooper and Mrs. Haynes and talked about this opportunity, knowing that it was on the horizon. Interest rates were a lot higher then than they are today. At that time, the refinancing opportunity on each one of these issues was a savings of about $200,000 on each one. Tonight, you'll see when we get to the summary page, we're about $350,000 on each one of these refinancing opportunities, and that was actually based on interest rates last week. Rates have just been virtually coming down every day. It's pretty unprecedented what we're seeing happening in the financial markets and especially in the bond market in terms of how much interest rates are dropping. So that's really what creates the opportunity that we're going to talk about, is simply interest rates are so much lower than where some of the district's debt was that was issued 5 years ago. And I'll give you a couple pictures of that in the handout that I passed around. If you turn to the first page, there's an interest rate chart there that follows the index that we use for pricing bonds in the municipal market. And what we're showing is just a 20-year snapshot of history of these interest rates And if you look over in the lower right corner where we drew the box around rates, you can see most recently how the line basically just goes straight down. That's where interest rates have come since the end of 2018. Basically all of 2019, they've been coming straight down to the point where we drew the red line across of where current rates are, and we are now within 2 basis points of the all-time lows that we saw in the summer of 2016. And those all-time lows were the lowest we had seen in 60 years of data on this chart. So it's really incredible. What has caused it? Of course, it's worries about the global economy, the impact of the trade war. In reaction to that, we've had the Federal Reserve cut interest rates in July. That was the first rate cut that we've seen since the recession in 2008. It's widely anticipated that they're going to cut rates again at the September meeting, and now the futures market even has another rate cut factored in for the October meeting. So Fed's reacting to weakness that they're seeing in all the numbers. You're hearing about it on television and reading about it, certainly in all the financial papers. So it's been pretty substantial, the drop in interest rates, and that's really what creates the refinancing opportunities. On the next page is really just zoomed in on the box that we were showing you. Since the lows that we saw in the summer of 2016, you can see interest rates went up. We kind of hit a high back in the fall of 2018 in November. And then, as I mentioned earlier, ever since then, we've seen interest rates just really come crashing straight down. Page 4 is the page that we use to keep track of the district's debt and help the administration in terms of budgeting for the bond issues that are outstanding, looking at what the overall debt service of the district looks like. So since some of you might be seeing this page for the first time, I'll just take an extra minute to just kind of take you across what you're looking at. Column 1, we look at the debt service by your fiscal year. So that's what's shown in column 1. Your final payment is actually on all the district's debt. It occurs out in the year 2033 when you go across there, and it's actually on the 2016 bonds. Column 2 is a lease that the district has a few years left on. It's an energy lease. You can see those payments. So what you're seeing, that 536 represents a principal and interest payment. So it's the total payment that the district has to budget for. Column 3 is the 2014 bond issue, and that's one that we're going to talk about refinancing. Column 4 is the 2015 issue. That's the other one that we can refinance. Column 5 is the 2016 issue. Column 6, the 2017 bonds. That was that large refinancing transaction that saved over $4 million. And then we had one other refunding after that in 2017 that also produced some substantial savings for the district. So when we add up those payments on each one of those issues, you end up with column 8. And if you look at the payment scheduled for this year, the total is about $6.1 million is your total principal and interest. And you see that number for the next 2 budgets. And then it goes up to $6.9 million, and that is your running rate out through the year 2033. So really, the district's debt prior to those refundings was at a run rate of about $7 million a year. We had the substantial refinancing savings from these issues, really 2014 through 2017, started taking the savings over a 5-year period, and that's what brought the district's debt down to that run rate that you're at right now of about $6.1 million. The important issues and why we're talking about the 14s and 15s, when you look in columns 3 and 4, and if you go down through those columns and get into the lower box where we have things shaded, there's a third line down that says the call date. And that call date is important because that tells us when we can actually call the bonds from the investors and replace them with a lower interest rate. So there under the 14s and 15s, you see that date is February 15th of 2020. The IRS tax laws allow us to refinance 90 days prior to that date. So if we back up 90 days, we can actually close here November the 15th or after on a refinancing transaction. Takes us to update the credit rating and the offering statement, take that whole process of working with your administration takes about 45 days. So that's why we're here talking about authorization to put all of this in motion. With the earliest we'd be able to lock in an interest rate would be basically October 1 to close 45 days later on November 15th. So we're in that window. You have two issues that are callable now. You can see your next opportunity would basically be a year from now. If interest rates are still where they are today, we might be back here a year from now with an opportunity on the 2016 bonds. You can see they're callable 2/15 of the year 2021. So turn to the next page. The only difference here is on each one of your bond issues, the state does help you with your principal and interest payments. Through the PlanCon process, you do get reimbursed for a portion of the payments that you make. So on this page, we take into account what those reimbursement factors are. We've netted that out. And so in column 16, if you just compare that far right versus the total gross payments we were just looking at, you can see your payments on a net basis go from about 6.1 million per year that you're netting out to about 5.3 million. So that difference is what you're getting in state aid each year through the PlanCon process. To focus in then on the opportunity, specifically on the 14s and 15s, I have a summary page for you on page 6. At the top, a couple of the details on the 2014 bonds first. There's about 9.5 million of those still outstanding. The interest rates on those bonds right now are 2% to 3.25%. And as we mentioned earlier, the call date is February 15th of 2020. The 15 bonds there's just under 9.7 million of those are still outstanding. The interest rates are virtually the same. The call date's the same. So those two issues, actually the purpose of those was we were refunding a large 2008 borrowing. We have broken them up into $10 million pieces. There's also tax laws that say if the district issues less than 10 million in a calendar year, the bonds can be labeled bank qualified. And there's two big benefits of that. One is lower interest rates on a bank qualified issue. And two is you can have a 5-year prepayment provision. So back in 14, we basically sliced up the refunding of the 2008 so we could get those better interest rates and that shorter call feature. We would recommend, since the calendar is clean, you haven't issued any debt here in 2019, so that $10 million allocation you have to use here in 19. So we could have a new 19 issue refund the 14s, and then a new issue that settles in 2020 refund the 2015s, and you'd be able to get all the debt at a lower interest rate and have 5-year calls on it to preserve the district's flexibility on those issues.
Can you explain the benefit of 5-year calls so I understand it?
Absolutely. So on issues that are larger than 10 million, investors really want more call protection. So typically when those bonds are sold, they might have an 8-year call. So let's say, for instance, if these 2014 bonds had an 8-year call, we'd be sitting here and we'd have no ability to call them in and take advantage of lower interest rates. So we always try to get our clients the lowest interest rate, the lowest call date, shortest call date, because it gives you maximum flexibility to try and pull them back in.
Well, just want to make sure I understand.
Yep,
Thank you.
good question.
Another question. You said 19 we haven't issued yet. Is it calendar 19 or?
Yes, the bank qualification is measured by calendar year. Yep.
So we won't be able to, you said October 1st would be the rate we'd have to wait to see, because right now it's going down, but we can't lock in until October 1st. So what is the rate that would, I know, if it's too close, it's not going to be worth all the time and effort. So what is the lowest, or what is the highest actual interest rate that would benefit us to redo this?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a good question, and actually in your authorizing resolution, it has a minimum savings percentage, that we would only proceed
Okay,
if we're
perfect,
producing
okay.
X amount of savings. What we've recommended is a 3% target, which the district has used in the past, so that if you're, so say on a $10 million issue, if you're not achieving 300,000 of savings, we would not proceed. Where we are today, as I mentioned in these next two bullet points, we're about 350,000 of savings on each, and that was last week's number. We're even higher than that today based on
Right, but if it would go back up before October.
Right,
which
so
you're not
interest
ready to
rates,
do, but-
you know, to
okay.
get back down, interest rates would probably have to move, 30 or 40 basis points higher than where we are today.
Okay.
That's not really expected to happen. But you're correct, we have interest rate risk between now and selling that first issue. So what the schedule that we're proposing is to do the 2019s that we would price on October 1, close on that November 15th, that's absolutely the earliest. And then on the 2020 issue, price those on December 1 and close in early January. So it's closing in the new calendar year. The closing date is what matters for tax purposes, gets us into that new calendar year for bank qualification. So between the two issues, you have about $700,000 of savings. The way the savings just kind of naturally occur because of the payment structure of those existing issues is they're kind of spread over the next 3 budgets. So we've talked a little bit about how you want that savings to come in. That's kind of just naturally how it falls over the next three years. So I think that's the recommendation of the administration is to kind of take the savings.
Question about that,
Sure.
we're taking it all in 3 years, and we're hoping that something happens 4 or 5 years from now, we're not gonna get it, if that's all down the lane anymore. If we took it, spread it over the full amount, we're looking at a $50,000, $60,000 a year increase. But now you've got a budget that's balanced all the way through, so you never run into those large sums again. So it's about a $300,000 swing when you look at some of your repayments. 6.1 to 6.9, that's a pretty big jump.
Right.
You spread it out over 14 years, it's $60,000 more each year combined. It's not as bad. I mean, yeah, you don't get massive savings in the beginning, but then you have an unrealistic budget.
So are you saying if you
Looking at-
just
again,
target?
That's a question for everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm looking at an unrealistic
Yeah.
budget for the next 3 years, and so, because we're taking it.
I guess another question is timeline to take this decision. Does it have to be tonight to figure timelines?
So what we were trying to do was basically take the board's authorization, take that, get that done. We obviously aren't selling the bonds until October 1. What we still have to do is get your credit rating updated, get the offering statement. So we have some work to do until that period. So we don't need to know now
Okay.
how you would take the savings. That,
No, but you need to go ahead tonight to meet the timeline. It can't be, get the information tonight and make a decision at our normal meeting 2 weeks from now.
we advertise this just to kind of take care of that step. There's no absolute requirement that you do it tonight. We were just kind of laying out a timeline to, keep the process moving.
I'm just wondering, questions that come up. This is the first time I'm seeing it, so
Sure.
I'm sure it's been advertised, but people are out of town and all over the place.
Sure.
There are others that are going to have similar questions that struggle. We make it. You said we don't have to make that decision tonight.
I have a question. With all this, looks like we'll be doing our call here in October, authorizing, you guys then turn around, looks like we'll do another one in December. What are your fees?
Sure.
District?
So all of the savings that we're showing here are net of the issuance cost, so that $350,000 estimate is after the estimated issuance cost. The total fees are about $150,000 for each transaction, and so that's including the underwriting fees and the legal fees, the credit rating fee, the offering statement. You have a paying agent bank, so that's kind of everything, and that's a rough estimate, but it's kind of close to, on the transactions that you've done before, similar to what they've all kind of worked out to be.
Okay, and RBC's had a pretty good history here at Daniel Boone redoing our bonds, and it looks like, we'll be back in a couple of years with others if things go well. So, I didn't know if there's a portion that RBC would like to, you know, think about making a donation maybe to one of our academic funds or maybe our one-on-one initiatives, just as a, hey, you've been a good client, here's a little bit of a bonus that it goes right back into the one-on-one, which is the laptops for the iPads for the kids. So just something to think about, if you've been a good client. Sometimes it's nice to be rewarded for being a good client. I'm not saying you're not doing good service, but perhaps there's a way to thank the district in another way.
Yeah, typically the way we would probably be able to help is through, I think you have an education foundation. So events and sponsorships and through the education foundation, those are things that we can get approved and make contributions. So certainly if Dr. Cooper could send me some information either on an upcoming event or anything through the foundation, we'd be happy to support that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Do we want to address your question anymore on the savings structure and, you know, kind of what the recommendation is there? I think if I was hearing you, you were saying, you know, if you took the savings and spread them over the years where it goes back to 6-9 and kind of carved off a little bit each year.
I think it just gives us a more consistent budget throughout versus, you know, you go from 6-1 3 years, and 3 years from now you see this, you know, big cliff that we're falling off of, from whatever the case might be, and I'm not suggesting we are, but just from the standpoint of it's a much larger number to deal with versus more of a even number. If we can make that work in our budget, now we're looking at budgets that are more consistent versus not. And I'm not suggesting we do that, I'm just suggesting maybe we talk about it and say, is that a better approach? Because you can't always, 3 years from now, we might be looking into this and interest rates might be higher, and we don't have this opportunity. And so now, all of a sudden, now we have to step up to a $600 or $700 additional payment. It may be easier to kind of shoehorn it in now and say, let's deal with it today instead of kicking it down for tomorrow.
I think those are some of the discussions that some of the board members that were here in 2008 or 2017 when we were talking about that huge savings.
Right.
That was the decision, you know, not just to take it all in 1 year, but to spread it over 5, but knowing that it was going to create that step back up at some point. We all said, now remember, it's going to go back up after all this savings.
Right.
So, you know, you could certainly, we could structure this to target those later years. Now, the 2014 bonds only go out to 2031, so we could only take those savings through that year, so we couldn't get out there to the very end. But to your point, if you wanted to carve off a little bit each year, you could certainly structure it that way.
Yeah, Mr. Strobel, just so you know, I mean, a little history, I was actually an advocate of stretching it out a little longer last time. When we did the last issue, I was looking more for like an 8 or 9, 10-year kind of thing. The board at the time, however, decided to go with the reduced time frame. So I mean, there's pros and cons to doing it both ways.
I just wanted to make sure, I wanted to know, is
Yep.
it something we can talk about? So it is
Yep.
something we can talk about, so more importantly than anything else.
Yeah.
Good point, good point.
On the structuring like that, we would need to know that answer probably about 2 weeks before we're ready to price the bonds, because we start to show investors what the maturities look like.
Correct.
So we would need to know that answer probably mid-September in terms of how you want to structure the savings.
Lou, will
Yes, sir.
I think I did see in the resolution. Will we go out and get insurance on the issue?
Probably not. So your credit rating's very good. We're at a AA minus.
Right.
Had a stable outlook on the last issue. Typically with a AA credit rating, we don't need to go out and add bond insurance on top of that as extra incentive and protection for an investor to buy your bonds. So I think everything's been pretty
Okay.
good financially.
That's what I was hoping to hear. Yeah.
For the district, so it was our intention, we've been running these numbers assuming that your rating's going to get reviewed at the AA, and we would not need to purchase insurance.
Okay. Thank you.
So, all good questions. So that's the timeline. I think I mentioned our next steps are updating that rating process, updating the credit rating, getting the offering statements ready. The resolution that you have before you basically authorizes the team to sell the 19 and the 20 bonds. You would still, once we actually go out and price the bonds, we bring those results the afternoon of the actual pricing, get that to the business office. basically for a final sign-off by the board president to accept it. So no transaction would actually occur without the board president's approval. And it's called a parameters. We've done that with all of the recent issues. It really gives us the most flexibility to be able to pick a day right around October 1 and price the bonds. And that's going to be important with these low interest rates. Issuers, everybody's doing what you're doing. So there are a lot of issues coming to market, and obviously we want to steer clear of when somebody like the Turnpike's coming with a huge issue.
Now, we had already discussed as well, we were going to take maybe the savings up front and hold it at the district and use that at a further time, because I can designate those funds as well, and you can make a decision at another time instead of spreading. There is options there.
Would timeframe wise, finance committee meeting, would that, is there enough time to,
We can do it at the September meeting
September.
to have that discussion.
Yeah.
That's what me and Lou, instead of spreading it out over 4 years, give us this decision, so when that cliff comes,
Right.
we have the money sitting in a special designation. That may give us another year while we're trying to get everything straightened out.
My only concern with that is it somewhat leaves the control out of taking the long-term debt down. We could use that for other things and then find ourselves a little bit later.
If you special designate it, no, you can't without a board decision.
Yeah, the board could make that.
Yeah, but-
change. There could be pressure to say that you have this money
Exactly,
sitting
I
there.
would like to, I think if we leave ourselves fiscally better off, again, it's a longer discussion, but if we leave ourselves fiscally better off, we're not all gonna be here in 4 or 5
Right.
years. So if we do the right thing, at least the next board coming in isn't eating our mistakes as much as,
eating what?
we all make mistakes.
We had those same discussions 3 years ago. So, because we weren't sure what the future would bring, so. But
We know what the
Good
future
conversation.
brings in our budget, it's not very good news, so this is a good way of delaying that a little bit.
Any more questions for Lou, or Lou, do you have anything else for us?
Just that, so the resolution that you have authorizes the team, it has that minimum savings, that the transactions don't happen unless there's at least 3% savings. So basically, all the authorizations are there. Ellen Enters, your bond counsel for Fox Rothschild, is also here to answer any questions regarding that document. It has similar authorizations to the resolutions that we've used in the past.
Okay, thank you much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We're looking for a motion now.
Okay, well, let's, first of all, are there any public public comments on any of the agenda items on our special voting meeting? Okay, seeing none. Yeah, so, sounded like you might wanted to table it, but I wasn't sure where you were
No,
going with that.
I do have the rest of the agenda, some of the things. I'm not sure that, assuming everything on the agenda is urgent that needs to be addressed tonight, get for the normal process.
Okay.
But part of it is the coaches. The coaches list, it wasn't in the original budget. Now we have a partial list. This is the problem that's been ongoing.
Okay.
We're approving the coaches.
Well, all right, so let's approve 7A, and then we'll get to the personnel, okay? Is there a motion for 7A?
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Durso, second by Mrs. Olson. Roll call vote, please, Mr. Wolf.
no discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Figured we had enough. Any discussion?
This is as a matter of order.
Any discussion? All right.
Ms. Albright. Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Durso.
Yes?
Mr. Strobel. Yes. Mr. Wolf, yes. Ms. Olson.
Yes.
Mr. Radka.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Now we'll go to personnel. We have 8A, and we did pull B, so it's just, we pull all of B, or is there?
Yeah, I'm confused, that was my question.
Yes, now that I'm looking at it more clearly, because there was B1, 2, 3. So we're adding 8A, so it's just B1 now. and not B1. So we're eliminating 2B, 3. Is that what I'm getting at?
And B1, C, and D, we're adding those? Is that right?
Are we doing?
Clarification,
Let's see
Mr.
here. Yes.
What's A3?
The agenda edit is for adding the retirement of Mr. Blankenbiller under 8A. It would be number 3. You see 1 and 2 is there with,
So we're adding 8,
right,
8A, 8A, 3A,
correct.
and then we're
And we're also looking to add 8B,
B,
which is,
B1, so we're having
B1.
B1CD.
correct.
All right, we have an A.
And then we're making a change to B1A,
Effective
the
date
effective date of the
Correct.
of the hire.
tomorrow.
Got it, okay. This takes us a little while sometimes to sort through this.
So I'll make it,
Through 1C then, is that what it is?
Well, so
1C?
it would just be, the motion would just be 8A, B as amended, really is.
I will make a motion for 8A through B as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wolf. All right, now, Mr. Miller, let's go into it.
Some discussion, and I'm assuming, looking at the dates, that most of these are happening before our next meeting, so I guess in a sense it would be preferable if we saw them before that, but I'm a little confused on the numbers. I guess it's D, the motion to approve middle school and high school fall athletic coaches and attachment forthcoming. There wasn't one until tonight, now we have an attachment, but it's not the full coaches list. And we've been through this process before, that every time, every season, it's just thrown at us without going through the COW. Without having to give any advance notice to review it. So, and now we're doing a special meeting before the council. So, and if there's urgency, I guess we have to do it, but this list is not the full list of coaches, so I'm confused by that.
Yeah, obviously the fall athletic season started today.
Yep.
So that's why there's the urgency of getting these folks on the field with our students. Some of these hires were later. We were transitioning that in our athletic and activities department, so that with the transition, it kind of set us a little bit behind, and we will do better.
Yeah, irregardless,
Moving that
Mr.
forward.
Miller is correct. It happens year in, year out.
Well, I guess the other thing that confuses me a little bit is all of these positions have been approved, except for that there's one on here that I'm not sure, it's a year 0 at field hockey, so I don't know that person, but as these people come on board, we approve them, and then until they resign, they're still there.
Yeah.
But the partial list, there's no golf, there's no other assistants, there's no, and these other people have been here before.
Well, when it was discussed in the agenda meeting, I asked if we could cull it down to just those in which the coaches had to be approved prior to the kids actually working with students.
Okay.
So I guess I'll be the partial catalyst for that, because I did ask that we not throw everything in there, including the kitchen sink, just those positions that need to be approved, because they're going to be working with our students before the start of school or our next meeting.
They're not all there. My daughter's at soccer practice tonight. He's coaching and he's not on the list.
That's a different concern.
Well, I won't digress. Well, actually, this is kind of ties in, obviously. I mean, I see in our committee of the whole, we do have some upcoming, student trips, overnight field trips, which are well in advance. So I want, kudos for getting that on there. Now we just need to get that. And the part of the issue is we don't meet in July. And there's a ton of stuff that comes, a lot of contracts, a lot of everything else in the budget in June. June really gets bogged down. I don't know the solution, but I know the problems we have, and some of this stuff just gets unfortunately it's not. You got to have that mindset where come like April, or they got to get start thinking of getting those coaches in for June, for the fall, or at some future point, I don't know if this board needs to meet in July, but, you know,
At least make it through email.
yeah, something.
No, we can't vote that way. I think you need one meeting in July, like we did this year.
And then,
Maybe catch the wrath of the public who,
I think we advertise it when we're ready to advertise. I think, I saw that that's coming up. Maybe we just add that now. And if you have to cancel it, that's great. If not, then it's already.
I guess to the public's comments, that we're doing the same thing that they complained about in July, we're just doing it in August again. You're having voting without discussion.
Come June, and you have a lot of these contracts that come due, and I mean, we're all volunteers here, and you get that email that's like 100 pages long, and you're like, am I going to read through this whole darn thing? So, I don't know if there's any way to spread some of that stuff out a little better. I'm not sure. But
We'll take a look at it.
Irregardless.
Try to prove our deficiencies.
Were the years as of 2019 on this list verified?
Oh, no, it can't be.
Because I kind of see a discrepancy already.
Mr. Flowers is going in here.
Well, no, I asked that he gets credit for previous at other schools.
Oh, well, that's not what I thought that
That's years
this
of,
meant.
my understanding is that's his years of experience that he's being compensated for on our schedule.
Okay. All right, then, yeah.
so that
I
makes
thought
sense.
this was all on here with the zero, so I thought everybody else was already on staff.
it is.
Some of these people might be new as well, so the first time we're seeing their names, and we're supposed to just.
I mean, again, just because I'm involved with it, I think we should double check the cross-country numbers. I believe it's kind of, My math could be
Public
wrong.
meeting, there could be things that the public would like to raise.
Right, there's no other discussion, then have a voice vote for our personnel items. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, ayes have it.
Mr. Vice President, if I could introduce you to a member that we just approved to join our Blazer community, Catherine Altamari. She's in the audience here. We just approved her with the last vote as our second grade elementary teacher at the primary center.
Yeah, welcome aboard. Congratulations. Yeah. Yeah, you have an avid supporter in the crowd. Yeah, pleasure to have you aboard.
we promise we have air conditioning here.
Yeah. Actually, Dr. Cooper said this is part of the new initiative for
part of our
healthy
wellness
initiative. Yeah. Okay. Any other public comments on anything that we did tonight? If not, we'll adjourn and go into our next meeting. A motion to adjourn. Second. There we go. Okay. Then we'll just gavel right back into our committee of the whole. August 12th again at 8:12. We've already done the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Wolf, will you do roll call again for the committee of the whole?
Yes, Mr. Radke. Ms. Albright.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Jursa.
Here.
Mr. Strobel. Here. Mr. B. Scott. Mr. Wolf here. Ms. Olson.
Here.
Mr. Radke.
Here. Alrighty. Public participation does not change. It's the same as it was for the voting meeting. We do have one agenda edit. Item 7D has been changed to what here? High school student handbook. So that's the change in the high school handbook?
Yes, it's a clerical change to reflect what the board had approved earlier
For
with
the
the
activity fees, right.
Correct,
Okay.
it was wrong in the...
Did Mr. Miller catch that?
I saw that it's
And-
it's down the line with what we were.
I also have an edit to the Green High School handbook, and I just found it like 12 minutes before we got here. So,
Well, I give you credit because I stopped looking at those. I'll be honest.
I don't know how to memorialize it. It's on page 6 for the music organizations. under XI, number 11, there's an asterisk next to things that do not have, who have a fee waived, and there needs to be an additional asterisk in front of color guard, and there has to be an additional asterisk in front of chorale, and there has to be an asterisk removed from select chorus. And it's obviously just clerical.
We got that noted down. Okay, any other agenda edits from board members? Okay, seeing none, there will be an executive session following this meeting. I believe Dr. Cooper's office has some air conditioning, I hope. All right, then we will move into the agenda. So under item 6, any board discussion on any of the items on there? I did have one question. I see we're moving under P to, we opted to go with a new van instead of a used van. Is that correct? I think we were talking used, right?
We were looking at both options.
Okay, so the new was the better
Yes,
choice?
correct.
Okay.
I have a question under, I just lost it, H. And maybe we do it every year, I guess that's my question. Is this something that we do every year?
Does this fall under you, Rob?
Wilson, the Wilson language training.
Wilson reading program you're talking about?
Yes, Wilson language training, professional language
That's an
search.
intervention we use for special education. It does, that's a great question. It does require specific training for the teachers to use that program. We have history, the people who had the special ed teachers who have been trained in that before have now left the district, and so we have kids who have that written into their IEPs who need that specific program. That's why we made the training.
Thank you.
Good question.
That's being funded by access funds. The partial money that's coming in that we're requiring to get this year, we're actually deferring some of that for next year for the cost of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Obviously, a lot of the other ones are contract renewals, and there are several donations. And we'll certainly thank those folks for giving us donations on all times. And I do see that we're moving ahead with parking lot coating over at Birdsboro. Obviously, we haven't had a facilities committee in a while, but I know that was discussed before we even rented, I think, the building over there.
That's been on for.
Yeah.
You know, we're splitting the cost of the church and
Yeah.
having to get the other couple of quotes. We've got one quote in, but it's not to exceed 50%.
Are we? Is that, Mr. Durso? Is that? I know we had sent out to start looking at that for the rest of the district. Is that going to be on the agenda?
I guess we can put it on the agenda.
Well, I know we had one engineering firm come in, and I think Casey was looking maybe to get a couple other quotes. Is that
I
correct?
think timing-wise, it's probably for the other buildings not going to happen.
No.
Because it
Yeah,
happened
yeah.
already. But we can, I guess we got to discuss, you know.
We can get it prepared for next spring this week, and we can hit the ground running, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I have a question on 7A, where it has,
So you're already moving on to 7 on me, huh, Mr. Trimble? You're already moving on to 7 on me, huh? I see.
oh, sorry.
Are there any other board comments, questions under item 6, A through S? Seeing none, any public comments on those items? Is there a public? Just our one reporter in the back, hanging out, Denise. Hi, Denise. Now we'll move on to item 7, Mr. Strobel. Happy to field any comments.
Is there a possibility or is it unrealistic to think of a dollar amount instead of just, district reimbursement for administrative guidelines to kind of get an idea of the figure in our head?
No.
Why?
Because the kids have to, first of all, there's a certain big number of kids that participate in TSA at the middle school level, plus this every year. Then they don't get invited to go to the state tournament unless they qualify at the regional level. And same thing with nationals, like we don't know how many people who will qualify each year.
It's not something I would ever not go against.
No,
Actually, Mr. Strobel, this has been my pet peeve now for years, but I think we finally got it hammered out, so that, because every year we go back and say, what did we do last year? And so I think we finally have it nailed down and under the guidelines.
yeah, it is, I mean, you know, yeah, the amount per student, and it says here that, you know, there will be 5 to 10 chaperones, but, you know, as a previous chaperone, we pay our whole way, except for the bus ride there, you know, but
It was more just.
yeah,
to
no,
kinda get a picture
I
of my brain,
understand,
that's all.
it's just, I just happen to have some experience with that situation, and so it's not like, some of the other things where there's like, you know, the whole of a group, and we only have one group, and that's, you know, how many kids will go, you know.
But yeah, good question, yeah. And as, you know, I think the TSA, they're getting better every year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they are good.
And the competition's getting stiffer,
Yeah.
because more schools join every year.
Okay, I think we've gotten most of the handbook items out there, hopefully. The district comprehensive plan, Dr. Cooper, what, I'm sorry, I must have missed that.
That was it was approved to be posted for 30 days for review by the public, which it has been in June, so it has been posted for 30 days.
Was that our plan that Dr. C put together, or am I not thinking?
It was the one that she was facilitating, we put together as a district with various stakeholders.
Okay, that's okay.
So this is a final approval for that to be submitted to the state after the 30-day review period.
The draft has been on the website for more than the required 30 days.
I'm sure it's great reading.
It is very exciting, but as you can tell by we got 0 comments from the public. So it was perfect, obviously.
That's my first question. I was like, how many people commented? You know?
0.
Well, that's what
But that's what's
Mr.
required, is that we put it out there.
Mr. Matz is working on our website. Perhaps it got just, you know, lost in the.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
Alrighty. Any other board comments under item 7? Public comment? Okay. Item 8, Mr. Secretary, anything from you?
Yes, Mr. Rathgeb. I forwarded out to the board today, it's the PSBA elections. Basically the same routine as last year. This is for the row officers, and we have to vote, we cast a vote for each one as a board collectively, not individually. As last year, the row offices are being run unopposed, so there's no decision unless you would not want me to cast a vote for the board for any one individual.
Perhaps you want to run.
Sorry, no. So I believe I think it was October was the deadline that I put out in the email. So I scanned it, just take a look at it. Anything jumps out, otherwise I'm going to meet the deadline.
And I believe we're allowed to send a representative to the meeting, correct? To place our votes if a board member so cares to go out to the PSBA meeting. I'm sure the district will pick up the cost of that, right? For travel expense, and go out and mingle with your other school board members.
Or we can do it by proxy, right?
Yeah. I'm just giving you the opportunity to get there, Mr. Urso. Dexter is more than welcome. Anything else, Mr. Wolf?
No, that's it.
Okay. Under item B, the IU did not meet, so short and sweet. I believe BCTC probably did not meet either, did they?
We had a meeting in June after our last board meeting, so it was really some last minute approvals, one resignation, a key resignation in their office, and we also got an update on the welding building, which is moving along. So those are really about it. There's nothing groundbreaking. I know we had some students going to the competitions. So I haven't seen what the results are, of how they actually placed in the state or the national level yet.
Skipping down, Mr. Durso, anything from our state legislature?
I do not have anything.
Okay. Oh, is there a
There's a
Burke's
Yeah, the
fee,
first,
tax? Over there, yeah.
sorry. Berkeley
Earned income tax.
Collection Bureau. The meeting was the 27th of June. I know we had an executive session between them, but we didn't have, we just covered the essentials then. So I didn't bring this up. We had a very long meeting. They terminated the executive director at that meeting. And they terminated their agreement with the computer software company that's creating software. It was a really long executive session, and that's about what I can say about the meeting.
These computer issues have been going on for years now. You would think they'd have this,
Back from when I was on, back in like 13, 14.
okay.
Yeah.
It's a wonder our money actually gets where it's supposed to go.
I'm sure it does.
Alrighty. Any other reports from anybody? Public comment? All right, moving on to personnel.
Under C, these will all be filled in before we vote on it, right? For missing.
Yes, potentially some of that has to do with where we're at with our negotiations as well.
Okay. Because it'd be hard to vote on TBDs.
Correct.
Okay.
I guess will we see the rest of the coaches then in a matrix to approve as well? Because we approve all the coaches so far. We didn't do that tonight.
Yes, we will. I will see where we're at with the approval of those and the filling of those positions.
Okay, and just, I guess it's the current, normally there's a little spreadsheet of all the positions. Right?
Even the volunteers.
Is there an extracurricular meeting in between?
I'm going to
now?
look to schedule one in September.
Okay.
We didn't get the August out, so
Okay,
we're between now and the voting meeting.
okay.
Any other board comments from the personnel? Seeing none, public comments? Move on to enrollment. Board questions on your enrollment? Seeing none, any public comments? Right, then we'll go to C&I, and I have a feeling this might be a little bit lengthy coming from, seeing as I believe that the quote was, "Congratulations, Mr. McKnight, is the longest C&I committee we've had." Is that?
The only thing that was a part of our meeting was that the first item was the only thing that we needed to actually recommend to the full board was their.
Just stay there, Mr. Wolf. Just stay there.
It's really hot. So strategic agility training offered through two professors from the Columbia University. It is the way forward that the current administration wants to go to get all of the administration on the same page, speaking the same language, being able to find a little bit better way to communicate with each other, which means more effective communication to the stakeholders, whether it be a student, a teacher, to us, to parents, that we're all kind of speaking the same language. The reason it had to actually be something for us to recommend yea or nay is that there is a cost involved in that training. That if we wanted the strategic agility training with the Columbia University name attached to it, it would have been $25,000 a year. And if we wanted the strategic agility training taught by Columbia University professors with not the name attached to the training, it would be $13,000 a year. So they are recommending $13,000 a year for that training for our administrative team, office, home office staff, as well as the four education buildings. And our recommendation was to go ahead with that training. It is in the budget for administrative development for staff. It's not going to negatively impact any of their other training that we want to do over the next year. So
Where's that training held?
it'll be here. The hope is that we can get it, if we can get it approved on the next meeting on the day for kids school, that we can get them squared away to come for the in-service day in October. And that, the committee had recommended to put that forward to get that. We got a presentation from Ms. Rexroth from the middle school on the schools that work. There is just as at the high school we have those designations as an AP challenge school and the challenging high schools through the Washington Post and things like that. This is a designation at the middle school level that is research-based, that Ms. Rexroth has been looking into for the last couple of years. She wants to go ahead with it. There's no additional cost. We have to be members of a certain organization, but we already pay that membership fee for other reasons because we get other benefits from it. She handed out a pretty intensive rubric that we have to meet all the requirements of. She's going to start meeting with an executive, a building level group of teachers and educators, and to see, we need to get up to speed on that rubric. Some of the things we're already doing, some of them we're not. We need to work on. And she's already, over the last couple of years, identified some of the things we need to work on. And she's hoping that if she can start, she's going to start having regular meetings with the group in the beginning of school, and she's hoping that by June of 2021, so two more school years, she'll be ready to do our original application. There are 4 school districts in Berks County that have this schools that work designation, and one of them's Twin Valley, the 2 Wilson middle schools, and what was it? And Schuylkill Valley was it? Oh, did I misspeak? Twin Valley is correct. And she has a good relationship with she knows the middle school principal at Twin Valley and has some insight into how that process works from them. If we don't quite make it the first time, we can reapply. They give us a very detailed report on what we need to do better. And she gave a presentation. Any of these first 5 things that I'm talking about, if anybody thinks that they want to see the full presentation, we'll get it to you. Internships and Chapter 339, Mrs.
Marchenko.
That's right. One of our guidance counselors at the high school gave a presentation on that. Chapter 339 is what's required by the state for creating a program K through 12 geared toward helping kids figure out what career path they want, if they want to go to 4-year college, if they want to be going into the military, if they want to be going into apprenticeship. She concentrated mostly on what we're doing at 9 through 12. A lot of the things that are in Chapter 339 we're already doing, but she and Mr. Scores and Mr. McKnight, you know, that we want to be doing more than what's required by law. Our internship and apprenticeship programs are a part of that. Any of us that have kids at the high school level would have gotten the robocalls about the meeting that occurred over the summer to get folks involved in internships. We had 3 pilot internships for students last year. They were very successful. And at the meeting that happened over the summer, there were 16 kids that came to learn about it. And there were many more there, that were interested but couldn't attend the meeting. So we'll see where it goes. We have a lot of internships within the school district. What Mr. McKnight has pointed out is that the BCIU, with the apprenticeship system, BCIU has support, like with apprenticeships that are available, but before we start cold calling local businesses to get more apprenticeships started up, they want us to have a student who's interested before, and to marry to that opportunity before we start, you know, trying to get ones that are specifically for Douglasville or Birdsboro. ESY Summer Learning Program, we learned a bit about that from Shelley with special education. That's the extended school year, is that right? One thing I learned is that is not the same as summer school. Maybe everybody else knew that, but I didn't. Where it's for students that have an IEP, it's specifically to help loss of skills that that special education students have gotten over the course of the 9 months, so that there is not loss of skills in certain identified areas over the summer. Shelley said that she really wants to work harder with her staff to not over-identify kids that need to go into ESY. We had 49 at this summer at here, and then an additional 13, an additional 14 that were placed outside the district for an extended school year. And so she wants to make sure that those kids that are being identified, the point she made is just because somebody's identified as needing ESY 1 year doesn't mean they have to be doing it every year they're just here at school. So she wants to make sure she's, training her staff that we are, if a student is here over the summer, that they need to be here. And then what everybody's really looking forward to hearing about is the year 1 iPad numbers that we received from Mr. Scores and Mr. Matz, who are not here. They threw a lot of data at us. Mr. Matz told us that Schoology's been in the school districts for at least 4 or 5 years, I believe, and he said that the interaction and this number of students and teachers who use that platform to communicate information that's important for school, the amount that he saw of interaction with Schoology in this school year was more than in the 4 other years combined, the last 4 years combined. People, they really made use of getting back, communicating back and forth with that electronic media. We have 1,300 kids at the high school. The numbers that they were showing us of how many homework assignments, how many presentations they were doing, the kids were doing that were being done on the iPad, which means no paper being shifted around, and the teachers were actually creating documents that kids could fill out with the iPad. They were in the numbers of like 50 50 tests and quizzes per kid. It probably wasn't exactly that. It was probably 100 for some kids and like 40 for some kids. But the number of presentations you saw were 8 presentations created per kid for the year with the iPad and associated software. They are being used. They had asked teachers and students separately to answer some questions about the utilization of the technology in the classroom, and they had positive responses that I'm not going to be able to remember all the details of them, but they were significantly higher than the state as a whole. Like, for example, kids, teachers said that only 80% of the teachers said that they were using the iPads all the time. But 90% of the students said that they were using them, in every class. So, and that's like a perception difference maybe, but they are being used, and we're, the kids and the teachers are communicating through them. Hopefully they're communicating more effectively.
So I have one specific question on that.
And you will get it. I asked Mr.
I'm trying to send it right now.
Yeah, I asked Mr. Matz if he would send a copy of the presentation to everybody, because there is a lot, it's data heavy.
Okay.
So everyone will
So
get that.
with all that data, are we able to identify maybe some of the teachers that are struggling with using the technology so
Yeah,
that
he
we
didn't-
can
they didn't out-
target help to them?
They didn't out anybody, and then.
I wasn't asking out anybody. I was, do we see?
I
Yeah.
can tell you that. So Scott and I ran a report once a month last year. We could see who was on, who wasn't on, how frequently they were on, and then we would target that conversation with our technology coach. Go see that person and kind of.
That's great. Okay. Very good.
But at least I'm having a hard time not saying.
Do you need a technology coach to give you a hand there?
And, okay, so the other things that, after the presentations were over, then we discussed MTSS. Mr. McKnight is going to have to tell me what that means.
Multi-tiered support system.
That's right. Implementation for both, we'd already approved the implementation of that at the 9 through 12 level, and they are starting to talk about K through 12 for that. We talked about the pre-apprenticeships. I mentioned apprenticeships briefly in relation to the discussion of internships. State literacy plan and toolkits that Mr. McKnight is using the state literacy plan to make sure we are addressing everything that needs to be done K through 12, I believe. Curriculum, no, we didn't talk about that. BCIU training and alignment. Did we talk about that?
Yeah, so BCI has a whole host of trainings and committees, as many of you are familiar with, because you sit on some of those committees. We are aligning ourselves with members of the administrative team, sit on the various committees, and we go on all committees, so we're informed and online with our working systematically.
And then the last thing was suicide prevention task force. Dr. Sincere Pino let us know that while we were sitting here in the meeting, I don't know if you remember, we had talked a long time ago about being made a pilot school for the suicide prevention task force program, that if we, or not pilot.
That's for the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League.
Yeah, right, and that was, I'm sorry, that's different. That was the second thing that she brought up. Suicide prevention was what Mr. McKnight said, that all the administrators had identified that, of course we knew that it was something we needed to work on at the high school level, but he said that when he brought the leaders of all the buildings together, he was surprised that maybe not surprised, but just realized that there was a concern and had identified a need for people to be working together even as far down as the middle school and maybe even the elementary schools. So that is something that is ongoing. They're going to be putting together a task force on that. The Anti-Defamation League thing that I mistakenly spoke about a second ago, previously we had tried to get ourselves into, what is the name of that program?
It's, the Anti-Defamation League's No Place for Hate.
No Place for Hate. We had tried to get ourselves onto the list to get that into the school for a long time, and we got put on a waiting list. But they told us that if we might be able to get pushed up the list if we got involved in this study that they're doing. And we had talked about it and given them a go-ahead for that, like back in May. And they just got notified that we're good to go this year, and so that they're planning on visiting next week. Is that correct? Or this week?
We actually have training tomorrow administratively, and then next week with the rest of the staff in the
Right.
district.
Okay, and that'll be on the 20th, or it'll be like after the 20th then?
The program goes for the entire year. The study will go for the entire year implementing the ADL, No Place for Hate program. And they're collecting some data on it, and we're one of the pilot schools for that.
And I apologize, that was so long.
When Mr. Harris was here, I mean, we had that whole discussion about was some outside group was going to come in and set up in our school to help, with kids do some therapy and stuff like that, but that never.
Well, this was something this is something that we've had on the rig. What we really needed to do, it was decided that we needed to have perhaps somebody with a little bit more professional experience doing this after one attempt to have those discussions that didn't go so well.
Yep.
And so this is the data is this is the group that really knows what they're doing. And
This was different. I know
It was different. Okay.
No, but wasn't there a discussion about having some group of doctors, some. Is anybody?
Creative Health.
So is it Creative Health? What they're going to come in and like certain times of the week and have access to?
They're here, yeah.
They are here.
We are here.
Okay, that's right. I remember we had a long discussion, and that's okay. Okay. Any other questions for Mrs. Olson? Any public comment? Anything from the extracurricular department?
We had a brief meeting, Mr. Hurley and I actually met between Cal and the voting meeting in June, and basically just covered the rest of them, which we got on voting meeting agenda is approved. It's my understanding progress is being made. The sports manager, his position was approved as well. The last piece that I don't have any information on, the 2018 championship banners. It's my understanding they were ordered and had arrived, but I still haven't seen them.
They're in a box in an office somewhere.
There was a bowling and softball championships from 2018 that the banners were never ordered. They finally got here. I don't know if they have anything from 2019 that they need to address.
How's Mrs. Schmidt making out so far?
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
She's networking too.
Well, perhaps
Those banners had arrived.
perhaps they're in her office. She doesn't know it. All right.
We'll take a look.
Any questions from Mr. Miller?
I will just say we'll leave this.
Good. So to be determined. Public comments. Move on to facilities and transportation.
Our
Mr.
meeting
Durso?
on June 17th was canceled for the executive session that we had here as a board, so we didn't have a meeting. We will be meeting 26th at 6:15 p.m. We had a lot to go over. One thing that Mr. Strobel and I have talked about is the BEC, that whole getting that out to bid, and that has fallen to the wayside. I try not to micromanage and use a heavy hand, but we're missing deadlines, so we're got a lot of that in your lap to find out where it's at, and we have some timelines, which we're probably gonna have to ask for an extension, but I don't think it should be that complicated to get the work that we were talking about out to bid, so I apologize to drop that on your lap, but in light of the circumstances, if you could follow up on that. There were some deadlines that we are probably not gonna make, but that's kind of indicative of what happened here at the end with some facilities and things in the past. It just kind of got shuffled for a more important thing. Yeah, our facilities
since we're under transportation here, and just like death taxes, busing complaints is a annual ritual, and I try not to take too much stock in social media. But I do have one question on transportation. If indeed, this is correct, I personally would have an issue as a parent. But so, Mr. Wolf, by the way, thank you. But I haven't noticed any difference in temperature. But thank you for.
I'm getting some air moving back and forth.
Is it so? If I had two kids in elementary, one was in primary, and one was at intermediate. Is it true that they could be picked up at two different bus stops?
Correct.
So I mean,
It could be, and at different times as well.
If I had two elementary kids, I might not be able to. How would I do that?
Well, they're being picked up at separate times as well, and that was to decrease the amount of time the students are spending on the bus, which was one of the concerns that was brought to the attention in the previous, and they're not that far apart from each other.
People complain about distance today, it's a joke. And if it's 2 blocks down the road.
Yeah, I wasn't. My only concern was if I had two kids and I had to be at the same time.
At the same time, they're different times.
Okay. Okay. That was my only. Yeah, I didn't take stock into. Oh my gosh, I have to walk a block now. Yeah, I didn't. I was like, really? But, okay. Any other board questions for facilities, transportation?
We have a lot on the plate there.
So bring some refreshments. Very good. All right. Public comment. Mr. Wolf, anything for finance?
We did not have a finance meeting this month, so we will be talking about the audit, I imagine in September. So that September 5th will be our next meeting. But I did have a question for Ms. Haynes. Normally around this time, we have on an agenda the motion to approve those clubs that have submitted all their insurance and like the booster organizations in order to function in the district. Did we receive everything from them?
I haven't received anything at this time. I did follow up about a week ago, but I haven't seen anything. I think with the transition of the staff down there, we just haven't seen it.
Transition of what?
I mean, you're talking about the financials for the groups that we need them. They're supposed to.
Well, they're supposed to like like I'm just gonna go for Music Booster since I'm familiar with that organization. We always had, by the end of August, the insurance certificates, all the officers, the budget for everything that we're going to purchase, because that had to be made, public and given to the administrations, especially from the sports side, for the Title IX consideration. So, but if they didn't supply that information by the deadline that we had given them, they're not approved to function in the district. So that's that's part of what I think it was a 914 policy. So
We'll track that down.
Communicated to I know they reorganized in June like they always do, but we always did, and we always got our information in on time. So that's one thing I noticed that was
Not on
didn't have
that
one there.
What is the deadline, do you know?
It was earlier, I think it was later in August, and we moved it to earlier in August.
Yeah, it's supposed to be
But
earlier.
They've actually been working to spend funds, because they have a deadline of having all the excess funds spent by the end of the year, so I don't know.
They're supposed to list out the, for the fundraising they're going to do and what the money's going to be spent on.
But we changed the finances, and there was excess money.
You're correct, but they still have to have their liability insurance and all that stuff,
Yeah, I'm sure.
because they can't occupy the snack shack and all that without it.
The president of the Music Booster says it was turned in Mr. Spore last month.
He's not here.
I'm just saying, I didn't take a name out of the hat.
Yeah,
Like,
what
who's
is
not
the-
here? We can
What
leave
about
it
the rest
up.
of them?
I'm sure.
We'll track
So
it down.
he's got a lot of stuff to do. But yeah, I think it
track it
should
down.
be, if it's in-house, it should be on the agenda for us to vote on, at the next meeting, I
I
guess.
think it was just the sports, music, and I think PTC?
Laser Foundation?
No.
No, yeah, because they're separate. Yep, PTC, that's correct, PTC and, yeah.
Alrighty. Any other questions for Mr. Wolf, Finance? Now, there's definitely no public, so we shall move on to, who's pinch hitting for Mr. B. Scott?
I'll say, just read it, right there, right? Next.
Has he approved the August 26th as, like, we'll have that meeting then? Okay.
Yeah, who else is on that committee?
Me, that's what I'm speaking. But,
So did you approve that date?
no, I did not. But, and, you know, I mean, if as long as he's there, we can have a meeting, you know, and, but, you know, it is, I don't think there's anything new unless Mr. Hurley didn't have anything additional, to present. You didn't give Bucky anything in addition to the things that are on the list, correct?
No.
Yeah, so what it says is, so we got 2 that will be, ready to be, 2 policies ready to be updated on our website, D1 and 2, after.
So if I give a gift, though, I get to name a facility after me? Is that part of the policy? Is that?
Yeah, I think we've got a snack shack that if you'd like to have that named
Depends
after.
on when you hear it. Just one, maybe.
And you crack acquisition.
Yeah.
There you go. Alrighty. Okay, so first, actually, so medications and payments of bills, actually, second reading, so they'll be approved, right? Yeah, okay. Any other comments, questions for Mrs. Olson, since Mr. B. Scott's not here? Technology, Mr. Strobel?
I know for July, I think, but I don't have it with me today, so.
Okay. All right. Then we'll move on to old business. Just a couple of voting meeting agendas to approve. Any questions on those? Seeing none, then we'll move on to new business. Monthly meeting schedule. I think we all got that email for the December meeting. I did not comment since I will not be here in December, so I had nothing really to say about that.
This is the schedule for 2020.
Yes, that is correct.
Should we add a July meeting before we advertise it, and then we can't be accused of?
Again, I will not be here, so it doesn't matter to me.
That is a good point.
Maybe the,
Is it,
We
does,
always
the
cancel,
old,
right?
the old format always negatively impacts me if we don't have a meeting. So we bump it then to the.
yeah, I mean, I will say it is nice to get the month off, but there's just so much stuff that comes in June, and then we get behind the 8 ball, and then you're in July, you're in August, you're approving stuff that was already, you
You get
had.
it half off.
So-
No, I'm thinking my point is when we move them from the second and fourth Monday to that first and third or whatever. And I'm only one person, so it's really.
But as it conflicts with
my
your,
job,
yeah.
there's no way I'm never
Yeah.
gonna make those meetings.
Yeah.
I try to every once in a while make one, but it's always around budget time where I'm trying to close the budget out there too in December. So. And that's kind of an important one because there's always voting, so. If they don't finish their budget on the 1st of December.
What was the decision for that December meeting?
I think, taking a look back at the policy, I think there is something in the policy indicates it has to be on that first Monday, I believe. So we'll have to have it on that Monday.
Yeah, I'm not asking for it to be changed, I'm just letting you know, for me, I'm only one, there's always gonna be that conflict.
You know, if it's board policy, we can suspend board policy at any time. That's why I mentioned it, you know, can be run it by Brian to see. if
So
there's
it was
something in the scope of-
board policy for hunting day, is that what it was? Was the board decided that we're not meeting because it's the first day of hunting season? Is that?
No, we just threw it out there because it was
I was all for it.
a break. I mean, I just wanted to throw it out there and see what the board's idea was, whether they wanted to continue to hold that meeting or not. So, I mean, the responses we got were, it doesn't matter either way.
Okay.
Those are responding, so.
All right, well, you
Just
have
keep it
until next voting meeting to, if you want to add a July meeting or change any dates before we vote on it, so.
What's your thoughts on a July meeting, that way, you don't have to advertise it?
I like that.
And if we don't need it, we just cancel it.
accused of pulling fast one on anyone.
And, whatever, we're always gonna be
Still wouldn't have a calendar. You're just starting with one meeting, one voting meeting. Depends on vacation schedules. It's on-
No, I mean, just like to put it on the schedule, and then if we don't need it, we can cancel it.
So get with administration, see if you guys want to add a July
But technically.
date and which one you want to add.
Do you want it to split? Is it your recommendation to split between when the cow and the regular voting meeting was? We usually go 2 and 4. The second week and the fourth week, do you want to go in
So
the
you
third
would
like
do
we
the
did?
No, I would just pick
Yeah,
the
third
second,
week.
the second or the fourth week, just pick one of them.
Yeah, I'm fine with whatever. When there's situations that require some urgency, usually it has to do with the changeover of the fiscal year at July 1, correct? Like somebody that we hadn't hired by the last meeting in June is maybe wanting to start, and so maybe having it be the 2nd as opposed to the 4th maybe makes some sense. Unless you think that's too soon after the June meeting, that you think maybe, it would be often canceled.
If you look at some of the recent history, we've had late last minute retirements,
Yeah?
and
At
you're
the end
still,
of
you're
June.
still interviewing candidates for things you are, positions you are hiring for.
So you're thinking the
I'm
last
thinking,
week?
it doesn't affect me, but I would think later on in the month would
Right.
be best.
It gives a chance to go through some more interview
You
process.
have the July 4th holiday, I'm sure, pushes things back too,
That
so.
is true,
Fourth
especially
Monday.
when you're checking references and stuff like that. I just want to do it, it's, we might not even have it
Yeah,
every
it's just
year.
simple to cancel.
So would you like, we can go back and place that on for the fourth
I think so.
week in July, and then it'll be up to the board whether or not it's decided whether to
And
cancel
then,
it. That way it's
and
there.
then in June, if we think that we don't
Right.
need it, we don't have it.
Okay. I'll have her fix that.
Any other items from board members? Any new items? No? Public comment? No? All right, then we'll move to adjourn. So moved. Take a second. There you go.
Guys, as far as